Well, happy Thursday and welcome to today's mindful moment. I am Tawana and let's get started. So, I titled today's conversation Love is the Lever. And I know when we hear the word love, most of us really think soft, sentimental, romantic, maybe even husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, those types of things. But today, I am going to really challenge you to not see or hear love as mushy, but as strategy, as a life system that governs everything else. And so I was reading Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapter 22, and somewhere around the verses 36 through 40. And this is where Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answers in the scripture, and I'm looking at the NIV version. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like, um, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And as I was reading it, this really hit me because it made me think of the word highest leverage. Now, when I was in school, school administrator, and actually in the physical building of schools, you all know that my background is education, and I've operated in the capacity, or served in the capacity of a teacher, and administrator, principal, all the things. And so, as being a school administrator and coaching and developing others, I focused on something that we called highest leverage. And there may have been many issues in a classroom, like classroom management or content delivery and things like that. But my goal was to help identify what the highest leverage area that could potentially address all other areas. And we would develop an action plan to address and just focus on the one highest leverage area. And this biblical principle is that same concept. When we focus on love, in specific, love the Lord our God and love our neighbor, all other things begin to align. And then it got me thinking a little bit deeper. We are to govern ourselves to reflect the fruit of the Spirit. And I've talked about this several times in many other mindful moments when we think about the fruit of the Spirit. But of the fruit of the Spirit, love is the only descriptive and action word. All of the other ones are all, well, I don't want to say other ones because they're not fruits of the Spirit, but all of the other words that make up the fruit of the Spirit are descriptive words. But love is the only one that is descriptive and action. So let's go back to the scripture just for a moment and looking at verse 40. And for those who are just joined, we're looking at Matthew chapter 22, and we're going back and just looking at verse 40. And to give you context, once again, this is where Jesus was asked, what's the most important commandment? And so looking at verse 40, it says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And that's from the NIV version. But in the NLT version, the verse reads, the entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Now, those phrases, hang on and based on, those are system phrases. They mean everything else supports this. So, what's the highest leverage move that makes everything else align? Well, love is. Love is the highest leverage system in the kingdom. When love is in place, clarity comes, connection deepens, and sustainability follows. And so, as I was studying this, I want to give you a little bit more context and background, personal background of why this became so important and why what led to this. And so, this really helped me with some real life things that I was and am still wrestling. And I know this is why God really has brought this to my focus and really brought it to the surface and my attention. So recently, I had a meeting at my daughter's school to advocate for her learning. And to be honest, the tension was thick. The tension has been really thick. I mean, thicker than like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, minus the jelly. Or if you grew up in the early 80s, you know, when you got that thick free peanut butter sandwich, the tension was that thick. But in all seriousness and honesty, it has been stressful. And in preparation for the meeting, I was prepared to really give this school a piece of my mind and come with my like Alicia Keys, this girl is on fire mode. But in the days leading up to the meeting, God started to correct me in love. He wasn't harsh, it was not a judgmental correction, but through some gentle reminders, like bringing into my devotion focus. Scriptures like Joshua 1:9, be strong and courageous. Deuteronomy 31:8, I'll go before you. And those things kind of gave me a sense of comfort and a sense of relaxation. But that didn't end there because I still was on fire. I still was ready to give them a piece of my mind. But I felt God like really whispering and saying to me, like, Tawana, advocate, but let love lead. And so when it came to the day, I walked into the room, which was last Thursday, and that's why there was no mindful moment on that Thursday so that I can prepare for this meeting and I can have this meeting. But I didn't really realize also I wasn't just preparing for that meeting, I was preparing my heart and I was preparing for this meeting that I'm having now. And God was making space for me to live this out in real time. And as I approached that meeting, I carried peace instead of pressure and I let love lead. It wasn't easy, but it was a process that I had to go through. And I watched how love really shifted the atmosphere of the room and shifted that meeting. The meeting was productive, it was collaborative, it was respectful because love was governing the conduct and not my emotion. I didn't go in there with an agenda of let me give them a piece of my mind. I went in there with an agenda of advocating, but letting love take the lead. And that day, I actually saw that love is not about being passive, but it does bring order, it does bring clarity, and it really sustains the relationships and the results. And so that helped me to kind of adjust my thinking. And I was reading the story about the Good Samaritan, and that's in Luke in chapter 10, verses 33 through 35. And I'll read it to you. And I believe this is the NIV version, but it says, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii. And for context, denarii is really a symbolization of a laborer, someone's working full days of wage, all the money that they would make in that day. But he gave that those 2 denarii to the innkeeper, and he said, "Look after him. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Now, when we hear this story, we usually stop at the compassion part. We stop at the part where it's called the Good Samaritan, where he did a good deed. But if we look deeper, the Samaritan didn't just feel sorry for the man. He acted, he bandaged his wounds, he paid the innkeeper, and he promised to return. But here's what really hit me with that, because I've heard this story many, many times as a little girl and then growing up as a young adult and adult. We can probably recite the story over and over and we can visualize what this looks like because we saw a lot of cartoons and a lot of children Bible stories and things like that. But the Samaritan's reputation of love, I felt, spoke really loudly, that the innkeeper said yes to what he was being asked. He could have said, no, the injured man cannot stay here. He could have said, no, pay me all the money up front, not just for today and not come back later and give me some money. I'm going to need everything up front. But the innkeeper didn't ask for a contract of full payment. So this is where it had me to think that there was something for the innkeeper to have said okay to this whole situation and this whole setup. And I like to believe that the way that the Samaritan loved set an example and empowered the innkeeper to really do the same. And something in the Samaritan's character, um, how he just showed up in this. And if we go back into context, the person that was injured was of a different background that they typically don't even engage in or with one another. But there was something about this that allowed the innkeeper to feel empowered to do the same. He 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 created a level of trust, that the innkeeper was able to trust this Samaritan. And that's how love is a leadership of behavior, or a behavior of leadership, if you will. And that's how love really multiplies through systems. And that's that whole concept of being fruitful and multiply. letting your character precede itself, letting your integrity precede itself, moving forward in a manner of love and trust that others want to do the same because they see it. So it models conduct that really empowers others to do the same. Like what is it that you're doing? And I think that's what was happening in that meeting. If I came with a vengeance, then everyone else would have a vengeance as well, and it wouldn't be productive. It wouldn't have been collaborative. There's an old saying I remember hearing from being like in my young teen years. It says, a smile confuses a frown all the time. And I think that this is what this model. So when you are moving through your everyday life and you hear the famous and everlasting words of the great late Tina Turner echoing in your mind, what's love got to do with it? I want you to remember this, that love is not just an emotion. It is a system of conduct. And when love leads, everything else finds alignment. Now you can manage from rules and you can actually lead from love. One's going to burn people out and the other's going to build people up. People will operate and move when they are being builded and they are being supported and they are being empowered. But if they are burned out, people will quit all of the time, whether that's in your family, whether that's in your organization, whether that's in a relationship. And so, again, you can manage with rules or you can lead with love. You make the decision on how you want it to proceed. And remember, I said in the very beginning that of the fruit of the spirit, love is the only descriptive and action word. So God helped me to really see this as I was kind of breaking this down. And let me know in the comments if this is hitting you, like if you feel this. And so God helped me to see that of the fruit of the spirit, love is the highest leverage, and all actions described in the fruit of the spirit led back to love. So for instance, the fruit of the spirit is love. And then there's joy. Joy is love rejoicing. There's peace. Peace is love resting. There's patience. That's love enduring. Kindness is love serving. Goodness is love giving. Faithfulness is love staying. Gentleness is love humbling itself. And self control is love governing. So the fruit of the Spirit is packaged in love. So when we build systems of love, we're building a system that is going to last. And so, if a person's system, and when I say system, I'm meaning things like their way of thinking, their way of leading, their way of relating, is not built in love, no amount of technical strategy will sustain them. So, like I mentioned before, you can either manage or you can love. But if love is governing how we correct, how we create boundaries, how we communicate, and how we serve, then all else would naturally regulate behavior and maintain alignment. That's what I noticed in that meeting. Notice I didn't say that all will be okay. I said all else would naturally regulate behavior and maintain alignment. And this means you can navigate through the toughest of situations with peace. And that's that Philippians 4:7 peace, that peace that passes all understanding. So I want to ask you this. What would change if your highest leverage move in your system wasn't efficiency, but it was love? What are some things that you think could change in your life if you were to shift and think about it that way? Do a systems audit. Ask yourself, where is love missing from how I lead, how I correct, or how I even connect with others? And then do a sustainability check. Replace one habit of control or performance with one act of love, and not the mushy type of love. Think Good Samaritan, like listening before advising, resting before reacting. So y'all know that I like to make it practical. And as I mentioned, when I would coach my staff in schools, we identified the highest leverage, and then we would develop an action plan to address and just focus on that one highest leverage area because everything else would fall into place. When you're looking at all of the small things, you're really just bandaging the symptoms or bandaging the wounds, but looking at the highest leverage gets down to the root. So therefore, you can everything else will fall into place. So let's make this practical. And I want you to write these down. If you are somewhere where you have a sticky note, you have your planner, or you have something, write this down, or even come back to this. Title it: My highest leverage is love, or love is my lever, whatever one feels comfortable for you. And wherever you are leading, whether it's at your home, whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a community, or it's in all of those places, love, try a love system check. This is what I want you to write down. Get clarity. Remembering that love brings focus and fear blurs it. So ask yourself, write this down. Am I seeing this person or problem through fear, frustration, or love? And all of this takes a moment to stop and think for a second. Again, get clarity. Am I seeing this person or the problem through fear, frustration, or love? Write this down. Make connection. Remembering that love restores access. So ask yourself, write this question. Is my response building a bridge or protecting a wall? That one had to hit me, especially in that meeting. I was like, am I in here to collaborate, or am I here to just get my point across? And that's building a wall around me and my child. And lastly, think sustainability. Love is going to govern systems that build people up and not burn them out. So ask yourself this and write this question down. If I keep moving this way, can it last? Can I last? Is this going to be sustainable in the long haul? And not can I last for the week or can I last for the month? Think about generations, think about legacy. For thinking about our children, is this going to be something that's going to sustain our relationship when they're grown, when they're adults, when they're long gone and about? Are they going to want to come home when they no longer have to? If you're in an organization and you're a leader there, is this going to sustain where we're going to have low turnover? Or is this going to continue to create a high turnover rate? Are my people going to want to stay and continue to work through the toughest of situations so that we can get better? Is that going to sustain? Or am I going to keep retraining people over and over? Now, before making any decisions, ask yourself this. Would this choice stand? Would this choice still stand if love was the measurement? What would shift if your goal this week wasn't control, but it was clarity through love? In your conversations, are we trying to get people to see our point? Or are we having a humbleness of understanding and trying to have a conversation for clarity? Take a breath and let God show you one space where He's inviting you to love. And this all means that we have to stop for a moment. We have to stop. We have to breathe. We have to think through things. We cannot just be reactive. And that's how I was trying to go into that meeting. And I'm so glad that God sat me down. He said, "Sit down," um, for me to take some time to think about that, for me not to just hop on here and just start talking about how we can get better, but really live through this. And it's still hard. I still have to go back and think about, like, all right, am I connecting? Am I getting clarity? Am I making trying to make the connection? And is this something that's going to last in the long run? Am I setting a good example? Those types of things. When we think about love, remember I told you in the very beginning that I want to shift your mind from thinking about mushy Valentine's hearts and chocolates and all of those things, but looking at love as being wisdom. Love is wise. Love doesn't avoid harsh conversation. So notice this was not a conversation about think about love and then just bypass what happens. I still had to go into that meeting. I still had to advocate. I still had to be direct for my child's learning. So it didn't avoid a hard conversation, but it does change how we have them. And when love becomes that lever, clarity, connection, and peace follow close behind. They're not too far behind that. So this week, don't just talk about love, test it. Test it in your very next action. Let love take the lead and watch joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control follow. Because love is the strategy that aligns everything else. It's your highest leverage. So, if this mindful moment spoke to you, I want you to share it with someone. Share it with someone so they can speak to them too. Share it with the person that you may have to have the conversation with. Share it with the person that you're having tension with, not as a manipulative tactic, but so that you guys can be on the same page with having that conversation or navigating through that relationship. Don't send it and be like, hey, you need to listen to this because I heard this and I think you need to hear it because you need to cover yourself like this, but as a collaborative method. And if you want to go deeper, I do have a mindful moment reset series that is available at the link that's scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and it will be in the description as well. And you can go and check that out. And that mindful moment is a series reset that helps to move beyond performance and building what will last, just like all of the mindful moments, thinking about our actions and how we conduct ourselves, understanding ourselves better, so that we can understand others, so that we can have lasting relationships and connections with those that we are engaged with on a daily basis. And the number one person being engaging with ourselves. So, thank you for joining me today. I will see you next Thursday, same time, same space. But until then, let love take the lead and let it do it now. Have a great rest of your day.